Welcome to Married to History, where we try to be informative, entertaining, and family friendly.
Aloha, I'm Christopher. I have a fancy piece of paper on my wall that says I know more about history than most people do.
And I'm Shirley, and I'm a homeschool mom that relies on good curriculum, West Side Story, and Christopher to teach our kids history. Yes, West Side Story.
Give me strength.
I have a history question for you, honey.
I love history questions.
Is it called the Dark Ages because there was a candle shortage?
Yes.
Also,
Yes, there were no candles. Mankind forgot how to make candles and lived for 500 years, give or take. Some people argue about the time period, in absolute 100% darkness. Even the sun didn't shine during that time. It's a miracle we made it out. Yes, the Dark Ages are called the Dark Ages because there were no candles.
I knew it. Also, it's sometimes called the Middle Ages. Does that mean the Earth was going through a midlife?
The Middle Ages are not the...
You interrupted me.
I apologize.
The Middle Ages because the Earth was going through a midlife crisis.
I'm going through a midlife crisis right now.
Go ahead.
The Middle Ages and the Dark Ages are not the same thing.
Wait. So seriously, though, they're not?
Seriously, they're not.
Okay, Dark Ages, Medieval Times, and Middle Ages.
Medieval Times and Middle Ages, same thing.
Okay.
Dark Ages precedes. Precedes, that's the one that says before, right?
Yes.
Yeah, precedes Middle Ages and Medieval Times.
You might have told me this before, but that is not what I've always known from growing up and learning history.
It's not taught very well, like so many things.
So is it just we're lumping it together because we're lazy and there's not enough cool things happening at that time?
That's part of it, I would assume. The other part is just that even distinctions that different historians, different people will give you different distinctions, different names or whatnot for various periods based on their experience or their choices or whatever the case might be. In the case of the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, yeah, I know that I've heard them lumped together. It's the same thing more than a couple of times. I personally choose to embrace them as the different time periods. The Dark Ages, pretty much we can roundabout from 500 AD up to about 1000 or so AD. The Middle Ages are from 1000 AD up to about 1500 AD.
Wait, okay, so 1500 AD is that Renaissance?
1500 AD is about when the Renaissance starts.
Okay.
So the Middle Ages end when the Renaissance begins. The Middle Ages began when the Dark Ages ended.
Okay, so I would argue that your average person on the street thinks that the Dark Ages went all the way to the Renaissance. So it's lumped together. So Dark Ages and Medieval Times is the same.
I would dare say that on average, most people think the Middle Ages was a thing and don't know the Dark Ages was a thing, rather than the other way around.
I think people know that word.
Most of the people that I encounter, they're familiar with the Middle Ages and not the Dark Ages. So I could be...
Okay, so what's the difference?
We obviously run in different circles.
Obviously. So what's the difference?
All right, so we call the Dark Ages because, and it starts at about 500 BC, because that's
AD.
AD, sorry.
That's a big difference.
That's when, yes, it's quite a big difference. Because that's when Rome is finally out of the picture.
Okay.
That gets the whole name because of Rome. And it wasn't dark because, yes, people ran out of candles or because the sun stopped shining, because with the fall of Rome, Apollo stopped making his ride across the sky.
Well, I hadn't thought of that, but that actually makes a lot of sense.
That is cute, isn't it? Yes. All right, so no, we call it the Dark Ages because history is dark there.
Yeah.
With the fall of the Roman Empire, the Romans wrote a lot.
Right.
Like most major civilizations do, they write a lot. They keep records. After the fall of Rome, for most of at least the western portion of Europe, less so to the east because the Byzantine Empire still continued. But for the western part, we lose a lot. Literacy almost disappears because the Romans aren't around, their society isn't around, schools aren't around.
Oh.
And there's a lot of people who don't know how to write. And I don't know if it's so much that people just didn't know how to read or write, or if it's also that people just lost their interest in reading or writing.
So they just stopped passing that down.
Yeah, when you lose the luxuries of a society, of a civilization like Rome, then people are going to spend more of their time just farming enough to feed themselves versus having leisure time to send a kid to school, to learn how to read, to learn how to write, to have an interest in recording what's going on in their day rather than just working to not die of starvation or violence or something else that day. So we call it the Dark Ages because basically nothing was written down. Now I shouldn't say nothing.
It's a generalization.
Because there was a huge drop in the amount of history that was recorded. To this day, we are still learning lots of things, and there's lots of stories that come out of this period that have been handed down. But it's hard to know for sure what was what because of the lack of records. One of my favorites that gets brought up as King Arthur. So a lot of people associate King Arthur with the medieval period because of chivalry and whatnot. But no, actually, it's believed if Arthur did exist, he actually came from the Dark Ages, if not before the Dark Ages.
Right.
And one of the reasons why we know so little about him that we do is because of that darkness. Not a lot of stuff survived. We don't know what that survived was myth, what was legend, what was something else. So it's generally believed, or I shouldn't say that. The most interesting paper, the most interesting theory on King Arthur that I've ever read, and I'm inclined to agree with it, suppose that Arthur was actually probably a Roman, or at least one of the last men of some kind of Roman lineage, Roman aristocracy or whatnot, that was left in Britain. And his name was probably Arturus, and the legends are all based off of him and his efforts to try to preserve at least a peace or civil society, something to that nature, after Rome completely left the island.
Now that is a theory that our family has talked about before, and that's really cool.
Yeah, I think so.
But so Rome falls. Dark Ages happen. We lose details about things like if Arturus was real.
And it's not just the stories and the history of or the records of what was going on at the time. We lose a lot of technology as well. One of my favorites that I'm sure I say all the time, I know I tell my students this because they get a kick out of it, is plumbing. They had indoor plumbing in Rome. I kid you not. There were wealthy citizens paid to have their own running water in their homes.
Yeah.
And that disappears. The entire span of the Dark Ages, the entire span of the Middle Ages.
Right.
We don't have that. Nobody has that. The technology existed.
It shouldn't be that hard.
So it's just one example of something that we lose.
Right.
And we don't get back because we really don't see indoor plumbing becoming a regular thing again until we get to the Renaissance, or really even later after that.
That's so gross. It's hard to imagine losing plumbing. I mean, I get maybe like the farmers in the outskirts of or like the peasants in the outskirts of the Roman Empire or whatever, like maybe they didn't have plumbing, so they had nothing to lose. But it is amazing that the wealthy class, the ruling class, just lost it.
Well, again, it's part of it is that records weren't kept, or records records were destroyed.
But was everything bombed?
Well, let me continue.
Okay.
So, like I said, records not kept or destroyed, people not interested in reading or anything to that nature. But also, again, remember, with the fall of a society like Rome, we here in the United States, almost everything is taken care of for us. Somebody else is providing our power for us. We pay them for that, but somebody else provides it. Somebody else provides our plumbing needs, our sanitation needs. Somebody else provides a lot of our shopping needs. Right. We have a lot of things provided to us. However, though, when you go into the Dark Ages, when again that society is now gone, then people aren't around to worry about, I need to make sure that my pipes are up, kept and clean. The person who would do that, he's got kids to feed. He has to go out and start farming again because there's no food market anymore. The guy who would be interested in learning about that sort of thing, well, he's got to spend his time learning how to be a farmer again, or a hunter-gatherer, whatever the case might be. Right. Because again, there are more important things than education when you have no manner of society. Education is a luxury that, like many other things, almost everything that has ever existed in humanity's history has been dependent on at least one crucial step first, and that has always been food surplus.
Okay.
If no food surplus exists because there's not any one person who's growing enough food to share with everybody, then there's no time to do anything else. Because
that makes sense.
You have to be able to eat.
Right. And like, who wants to read a book and be a nerd? I mean, that's not very appealing anyways, even if you did have the time.
I can't speak to what the culture of the time of Rome was as far as nerds were concerned. Unless I would be willing to bet that no, back then educated men were more appreciated, more revered, instead of today where the jocks like. Well, I take that back.
Not today, but in high school.
I wouldn't be surprised if the jocks still like gave the nerds a hard time.
It's Spartan and Athens all over again.
But I'm willing to bet the nerds were much more appreciated, even by most of the jocks.
Yeah.
Or maybe not most of the jocks, but even by some jocks.
So it's just that they were starving and they had to spend more hours in the fields.
That is basically it.
Okay.
Not even, and again, not necessarily was it food. Food is the easiest one, the most basic one, but any manner of other things. There are lots of other priorities that humans need for survival. Think about every movie or TV show that you've ever watched where there's a group of people that got stuck on a mysterious island or something to that nature.
Okay.
The first thing that they look for is not, all right, where's a school? Somebody get me a book so that I can find out how to do indoor plumbing. The first thing they look for is, all right, we need shelter, we need water, we need food.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, if they
fire, water,
if they want to survive, they look for those things first.
Yeah. Well, most people that dropped on a desert island, I think, probably do want to survive.
Yes, and I guarantee
it was an odd qualification.
They go looking for food, water, and shelter before they go looking for a book or looking for indoor plumbing.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, so this Dark Ages era, that only applies then to the westernized world, the part of the world that was affected by the Roman Empire then.
Pretty much, yes, because we tend to, at least in Western culture, we tend to go everything by the way that Rome did.
Right.
If it happened in Europe, then it was a thing. If it happened somewhere else, wait, somewhere else exists? No, somewhere else doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So yes, we call it the Dark Ages because of the effect of the fall of the Roman Empire during that course of time. To the best of my knowledge, though, during those years, China was doing absolutely fine. China had written records. Unless I'm mistaken, the Chinese language has not changed in over 2,000 years.
That's impressive.
While their vocabulary might have changed, I can't say that to my knowledge.
Well, I'm sure. Like, language does evolve.
To the best of my knowledge, the writing, I don't know what you call it, the characters haven't changed that much. I remember speaking to one person about it. Him telling me that, the language hasn't changed all that much, so that somebody from China today, if he knows how to read, will be able to read a document that was written in like before the AD period begins, because the writing hasn't changed.
If that's true, that's super impressive.
I never learned how to read Chinese characters, so I've never had the opportunity to test that for myself to see if it's true or not. But if it is, I think that's super cool.
And today, our kids are having the issue because they're trying to look at like old documents where people are writing in cursive, and they have no idea.
Oh, it gets even better than that. Like, I have excerpts from documents that are throughout our history. Like, one of my favorites is the Magna Carta. And if you look at the Magna Carta from 1100, or no, I'm getting that wrong. Was it 1215?
Do you want me to look it up?
I don't remember the year. It was somewhere around 1200, somewhere in that time period. So that's one of the most important documents in history, at least by American culture. It's one of the most important documents in history. And if you read that document, you're going to notice, among other things, there's a whole bunch. I might be remembering the characters.
Is it F and S?
That's the one I was going to say. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of Fs where you and I would think there's supposed to be an S there.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of other examples of that too. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know they're in there. And I show these experts to my students and have them read that. And it's like they instinctively read, wait, no, that's the word, but that's not how it's spelled.
Yeah.
What's going on with that? So in English alone, we know that, if I've got the date right, that it is, I want to say it's 1215.
I'll look it up.
So if we got that right, that's just only 800 years. And obviously there's been changes in our language. Whereas again, with the Chinese thing is true, going back over 2,000 years, and they'd still be able to read something.
Right. And then you go just a couple hundred years more since that, and you get American English being completely different than British
1215.
English.
Yeah, bada bing.
You got it. You got it. Yes.
I earned my fancy piece of paper today.
You did.
I'd kiss it if I could.
Yeah, good for you.
You laugh, but you're jealous.
I'm very jealous. So Dark Ages, things were dark, no candles, Didn't even know how to use the
candles.
Oil lamps.
They had oil lamps and candles predate the Roman Empire.
And then at some point they find an old stash of candles. The lights come on, and we get into the Middle Ages.
It's like you're not listening to a thing I say.
Yep.
Your words hurt me.
Yep. So what's that transition? What's the at what point did it change, and why is it important to make that distinction instead of just calling everything from Rome to Renaissance one big Dark Ages or one big medieval ages?
Because we do recover per se from this. So in the period of the Dark Ages, another thing that's unique to there is that the world doesn't look much like we recognize it today as far as the countries, the places that exist.
The continents moved a lot. I didn't know there was so much tectonic activity at that time.
No, the continents didn't move. I didn't say that.
You said it didn't look the same.
I rephrase then. A political map does not, a national map, a kingdom's map, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
No, I can't say geography.
Political map, yeah.
Throw that in. Yes. Political maps don't look the same. France didn't exist at that time. The land.
It was Gaul. Was it?
No.
Oh, I
Gaul
thought it was
before the Romans.
Oh, I thought I knew something smart.
I was almost.
I was excited.
I'm still impressed by it. Good job there.
I knew the word.
So obviously the land was there, the geography was there, but there was that whole thing wasn't France. Wasn't even called France.
Yeah.
Francia was one of many kingdoms that existed in that area that would eventually rise up into dominance over all the others through marriages, through conquest, through barters and things of that nature. The same thing is true in England. Same thing is true all over the European world. Again, with the exception of that small corner of the southeast, which still remained largely in the Byzantine, the Eastern Roman Empire's hands. But everywhere else, the political landscape changes. There's no more unity. There's no more empire, whatnot. It just becomes lots and lots and lots of, not necessarily even kingdoms. I'd say it would be fair to say mostly territories.
Just people trying to survive.
Yeah. Kingdoms will eventually rise up, but they're all going to start from they're all going to start from the cities or maybe even the village level and slowly grow and grow. As we get to more uniformity, things closer to what we would recognize, this is around the time period that we call the Middle Ages. So it's like at about the beginning of the Middle Ages, this is where, France or something that is going to resemble France actually starts coming into being. It's still not all of what we would call France today, but large chunks of it are at least united under one king, one kingdom. Same thing happens in England at the beginning of about the Middle Ages. The wars between the Viking invaders and the British locals and the invasion of William from Normandy from France, which wasn't part of France at the time, have been settled, and England as we know it today, or I believe England still marks its history basically at this beginning point, or at least the
William the Conqueror.
William is considered the first king. Even though
that's William of Normandy.
Technically they had kings before that.
Well, but yeah, so it marks
yes, the idea that was the beginning of England as the country that we recognize if we look at a political map today.
Right.
Same things go on in Spain, not so in Italy, no, Germany, no.
Why not?
There lots and lots of disparate kingdoms there. There's no unification. Italy, and nothing that we would recognize as Italy comes into being until we get to the 1800s. Same thing in Germany. Those groups just never ally.
It's a long time.
Some people argue that the Holy Roman Empire, which exists at the tail end of the Dark Ages, fair part into the Middle Ages, was a unified Germany, but it wasn't. It was, There's an old saying, I don't remember who said it. I know one of my professors was very fond of it. The Holy Roman Empire was not holy, was not Roman, was not an empire. There was like no unity. I would dare say.
It was a good PR, like rebranding.
Yes, I'd say that was fair. But I'd say that Texas and California have more unity between them as United States than the Holy Roman Empire territories did to the Holy Roman Empire. So the Middle Ages is in that period where we start to recognize a little bit more of the political landscape that we have today. Basically, it's the idea that during the Middle Ages, order starts to kind of return to at least the western parts of Europe. We start seeing kingdoms, we start seeing expansions of power, we start seeing elements of civilization returning. There's not.
Did they get toilets?
No.
I would say that's the most important mark of civilization.
I can't say no for sure in every case, but to the best of my knowledge, even the royals back then, no, they didn't have indoor plumbing. They still had pots, chamber pots.
Yeah.
Though some of the, I should take that back. There were definitely chamber pots during that time, but some may have had
like a shaft in the castle, right?
Yeah, I don't remember if there was a specific name for them or not, but yeah, a shaft in one of their chamber rooms where they can just sit down and all their feces and whatnot just drop through this little shaft and out the back end of the castle.
Yeah, those moats were gross.
Yes.
They weren't like clear water like we imagine.
Nobody ever said they were.
We build sand castles, like they were full of poop.
You're telling me that you built a sandcastle and the water was so clean you would drink it?
Well, no. I mean, when you're at the beach, the water's clear.
Okay.
But no, they were full of poop. So much poop. They
were full of a lot of disgust.
So much poop. Sorry, go on. I got distracted.
No, that was basically so that's what we call the Middle Ages. And for the most part in the Middle Ages, a lot of these places are that chivalry is the order of the day, or I shouldn't. Chivalry is a popular thing of the day, but it's very much a feudal society. The idea in their feudal system basically is that there's a king, and the king is one guy. He can't be everywhere at once, so he gives a portion of his land to noblemen.
Yeah.
These noblemen, it's their job to take care of, to manage, to grow the land, and they pay taxes to the king. And also, when the king needs an army, it's their job to take the people that live on their land. So the
serfs,
the lords are basically like
peasants.
Landlords, basically that the king is hired to administer his lands.
Okay.
And they have to gather people to come fight for him. And plenty of kings are fighting with each other during the Middle Ages portions as they are trying to expand their powers, or as they're trying to press their rights for, wait a second, I was so-and-so's son, or I was so-and-so cousin, he died without an heir, this kingdom belongs to me. The rivalry that we read about during the Middle Ages that exists for a long time between England and France, a lot of that rivalry was because of conflicting claims by the various relatives. It starts off because William is from Normandy, a part of France.
Okay.
He has his claims to the English throne, but he also, as being from France, has some claim to the French throne as well.
Right.
So a dispute between England and France happens often enough because somebody in the British royal family and somebody in the French royal family, some point in time, their ancestors mixed up and got married. That created claims to both of them. And as various people died, got sick, were deemed not appropriate heirs or whatnot, different people would step up and file their claims. So there was a lot of fighting for power, for dominance during the time of the Middle Ages.
Right.
We kind of break off the Middle Ages and go into the Renaissance, not because the people stopped fighting, which is largely misunderstood about the Renaissance.
Okay.
But it is true that with the Renaissance, that drive for education, amongst other things, really starts to become more significant.
Okay.
And in reality, I shouldn't say reality, one of the many theories, and it's one that I support as well, is that the Renaissance kind of comes into being because of those medieval practices about war and whatnot. We can thank the Renaissance in large part to the Crusades. So, for two big things that contribute to the Renaissance is that, Italy, still populated, still has people.
Yeah.
A lot of discoveries about of old, ancient, buried, lost, forgotten places that were part of the Roman Empire are being discovered around about the time of the 1500s. One of the most significant is Nero's palace. That Nero, the famously horrible emperor, the guy playing his lute while the city burned.
Right.
After the city burned, rather than rebuilding all the city, he took
it
a
all.
lot of that land and built himself like the largest palace that anybody's ever built.
That dude's messed up.
I don't know that anybody's ever claimed to have built a palace larger and grander than his.
Versailles?
I suppose it's possible. I've never seen.
Now I'm curious.
We'll never know.
Why?
Because Louis the 16th, when he built Versailles, was it the 16th? Yeah, Louis the 16th.
No. Do you want me to Google it?
Maybe it was the 14th. It was 14th. Louis the 14th, when he built Versailles, he destroyed all the records. We have no idea how much it cost to build that. So we'll never be able to compare it to.
Well, we can compare the footprint.
Sure, you
on
can
the
compare the
land
size and whatnot.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But anyway, I digress. So after Nero was killed, a lot of that palace was filled in.
They just buried it?
Yeah, a lot of it was buried. Not all of it. Some of it was turned into other stuff. His lake, he had a man-made lake built on there. They built the Colosseum on top of that. That's why the original Colosseum was able to flood. They used the same pipes that he did for his lake to get in there.
Oh, that's cool.
But like, so I know that some basement sections, I guess you could say, of his palace were found, and inside they found a lot of the artwork of like mosaics, tiles, things of that nature, beautifully preserved during that time. Oh, it was an earthquake. That's right. Okay. There was an earthquake that that created an opening or cleared the land or something, and people were able to get in and see this thing that everyone had forgotten existed. And then warriors returning from the Fourth Crusade. Mm-hmm. So this was the one where they did not go to the Holy Land to fight. They ended up being a dispute for the Byzantine
Yeah, we talked about this.
Yeah, dispute for the Byzantine throne distracts the Crusaders because they're told that they'll be paid if they fight for him. That guy ends up not paying them, so they siege Constantinople instead. Still called Constantinople at that time. And again, remember from what we've talked about here, the Byzantine Empire, they survived. Yeah. So they had the writings, the culture,
Did they
the
have
literacy,
the plumbing?
And whatnot. I imagine they had some of the plumbing, if not all of the plumbing. Okay. I don't recall ever reading any records of their plumbing, but they should have. And so when the Crusaders attack that, the warriors do what all warriors do. They
take
loot
stuff.
Yeah, they take stuff. They loot. So they bring back a lot of the writings, the paintings, the arts, the things of that nature with them. And it gets spread around, and this contributes to the Renaissance. People thinking that, hey, we have a little bit more time, a little bit more leisure. Food production and whatnot is up. Trade is coming back. Order and stability is coming back to much of the continent. So people have more time to do other things than getting the basics, the food, the water, and the shelter that they need.
Okay, that makes sense.
It does. Okay. I think.
So wait, this is so minor, and I don't want you to spend a lot of time on it, but it baffles me that they just like buried all of that stuff, like in Nero's palace specifically. Did the people know that they were burying all of that, the paintings or whatever?
I imagine they did. They probably did it on purpose.
Why didn't they take them?
To be fair, we don't know. Did the people it's entirely possible that the people did it because bad emperor. We know that people have taken steps to remove or destroy, to hide, to bury anything from the previous rulers or people that they didn't like. But we also, it's entirely possible that it wasn't the people that did all that. It's entirely possible that the new emperor ordered all that be done.
Okay, I guess that makes sense.
There's I'm more inclined to say that it was probably the people and then maybe later an emperor, because after Nero is eventually killed, and there's no one left to take over the throne, or there's no blood heir to Nero. And I don't remember if Nero was a descendant of the same bloodline as Caesar.
Okay.
But I think after Nero, I think all the eligible men of the bloodline were done, and they weren't going to let a woman reign if there were any women of the bloodline still around.
Of course not. No way.
So Rome enters a civil war period where basically lots of generals, because a lot of people had their own private armies back then. They end up all just going to war with each other, fighting over each other. And so there's a couple of years of fighting where, again, there's going to be a lack of stability or a lack of order in the city.
And stuff gets lost. That makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else you need to tell me about the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages?
That I need to tell you? No. Did you have more questions
that you
about
need to tell me because I'm ignorant and you can't abide ignorance?
I love you.
I know.
That is important for you to know.
I know.
And I am a teacher. I encounter ignorance all the time. And I would be a very bad teacher if I thought to myself, all right, nobody's going home until we're all not ignorant anymore.
Yeah, that wouldn't work out so well in your classes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for telling me all that. And I guess we'll end there. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, then please subscribe, tell your friends, and leave us a 5-star review.
If you'd like to hear a future episode with more information about today's topic, email us at marriedtohistorypod@gmail.com or message us on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok we do TikTok?
We have a TikTok now.
We do. China. Married to History Pod.
Also, please contact us if you have a silly question idea or if there's something from history that you would love to learn about.
Just be sure to specify in your message if it's silly or serious, like my silly comment about China being bad. I love China. Because we don't want to treat a genuine quest for knowledge as a joke, like China. Not to say that China is a joke. That's not what I meant to say.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Okay.
All right, China. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.
I have friends that are Chinese.
Bye.
Bye-bye. A bit hard to make out.
Okay. Hold on. So what if I make it bigger? Can you read it if it's bigger?
Yeah, that's better.
It doesn't have to be yellow, but I made it yellow because that's your favorite color.
I get that. Why did you have to go admitting that yellow was my favorite color? Aren't we recording?
We are recording.
All right. Well, you don't want to give away like personal details about these things. I mean, knowing my favorite color is yellow. What if somebody stalks me on whatever the social things are today?
Because that is such personal information that nobody should know.
How many people out there in the world are willing to admit that yellow is their favorite color? I don't think I've ran into anybody else.
Yeah.
You say this with such like a lack of conviction.
Are you ready?
I thought it was assumed that I was ready once you hit the play button 52 seconds or 53 seconds, 4 seconds ago.
Okay. Let's do this.